Welcome to this guided series for new players for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. Now this video is going to be a little bit different from the previous videos because we're not going to be building or planning or talking about new technologies. What I want to do in this video is review the economy and the point that we've got to in the game. So I want to talk about that, especially from the perspective of a new player. And I am going to draw a little bit on my own personal experience of learning this game over the last 5 years. Also, as part of this video, I want to kind of show you the end of the growing cycle, which we've been working on in the last two parts, because I want to show you what happens when the harvest comes to an end, which it will do around the end of November. So we've got just over a month to go, and that's the reason why the game is running on slow. Plus, there are a couple of things I want to talk about related to our town here. Now, so what I want to do now is just kind of have a bit of an overview of the economy. And this is something that you want to do from time to time because you want to make sure that your economy is actually working the way you want it. And of course, it also pays sometimes, especially when you're learning the game, to look down and say, well, what's working well, what's working bad? Because the best way to actually learn this game is to get in and make the mistakes. And I'll be completely upfront. I've made lots of mistakes. I'm even prepared to accept that I've made a couple of mistakes in this economy, which I'm not totally happy with. I think I could live with them, and if I was playing on, I'd actually could possibly turn them around. It's probably the polite way. Now, the one thing I do want to talk about is the fact we've now reached a point in this series where we are now turning a small profit. Now, this profit is obviously coming from the export of oil, clothes, alcohol and food, which means that it's not a massive income. And when you compare that with our expenses, and this is something that you do need to keep an eye on, what your exports and your imports are. There's two ways that you can look at this breakdown here. The one is your essential costs, which is fuel, meat. We're now making our own food and clothes, so that's okay. We are importing coal because of our heating plant. And more importantly, we are importing fertilizer. But there's one missing from here, which we're also possibly importing, which if I go to this year, what you will see is, liquid fertilizer. And the reason we're not importing liquid fertilizer at the moment is that because we're not actually using it. And this is what you could call a seasonal cost. So that's another element. You've got what your costs which are coming in all the time. And of course, there's also power as well. So there are certain costs that are coming in on your economy every month. This economy is power, coal, fuel, and meat and electronics. So the first step in making your economy profitable, which is what we are doing now, very small profit, is by covering your actual operating costs is probably the best way to describe it. And then your secondary costs is construction. Construction costs are something you do have control over, because if you start to run into a bit of a financial problem, all you've got to do is shut down all your construction and just let the game run long enough to build back up your economy. If you are pushing ahead really fast, there is another option. Now, this option I'm going to advise that you use with incredibly great caution, simply because it's more of an option that you would resort to if you were starting on a very hard start with only about just over 1 million rubles to begin with, and that is taking out loans. Now, you can take out a loan for rubles, and you can also take out a loan for US dollars. Do not take out a dollar loan unless for some reason you've got a very strong export market to a NATO. Now, the way loans work here, you can have up to a certain amount, and you can see it says maximum amount you can borrow is 2.828 million rubles. The amount you can borrow is tied to the size of your population. Now, so you can take out a loan, and what you can do is you can take them out for up to 5 years, but you can see the interest rate increases from 2% to 4.1% over 5 years. They say the amount, I think it caps out at 2 million. I don't think you can take out multiple loans up to 2.8 million. I think the maximum amount you can take out only one time is 2 million. Now, that sounds like an easy option, but what you do need to remember is that if you say you take out a loan over 2 years, you've got not just paid back the capital on that loan, you've also got to pay back the interest in a 2-year period. Only ever borrow money if you are going to use it to enhance your overall economy and make more money. If you find you're taking out loans just to firefight the fact that your economy isn't profitable, then you're on a bit of a downhill spiral. Now, the other thing I will say is, because when you take out a loan, you will get the amount spread across here. What I would strongly recommend is that if you have to take out loans, say to cover an immediate shortfall due to a problem or something like that, only ever take out one loan. If for some reason you've taken out a loan and then you're starting to lose money again, what you want to do is take out the next loan, which is big enough to repay the first loan. So what that means is you're only ever managing one loan. Don't ever start to take out multiple loans, because that is the path to self-destruction. Because effectively what will happen is the interest and the repayments will drain everything out of your economy. And one final tip is, if you're taking out a loan to build something because you really want to move forward, that's maybe time that you need to sit back and smell the roses and just let your economy build up. I just want to take a quick check, make sure everything's going well with the harvest. So we've got to a point now where we are making a small amount of money and we've got control of the economy. Now, one thing you do need to be aware of is that those fixed costs, as you call them, will grow as your economy grows. And this is one of the reasons why you need to move towards self-sufficiency in respect of food and clothes. Because if you're producing your own food and clothes, you can expand your actual capacity to manufacture, and of course, more importantly, you can restrict your outputs to cover the costs of your growing economy. Now, one cost that will expand very, very quickly, and one that you will need to work on quite thick, is fuel. Fuel can be a little bit of a vicious cycle. That's the reason why an early objective is to get access to oil and start manufacturing your own fuel. Fuel can get very expensive, especially if you start to run trains, because trains really consume that fuel. In fact, probably a big part of our costs at the moment is the fact that we've got a diesel train here, and really what I should do is probably wrap it up. That is the state of the economy. Now, just to review our overall population. Our population is still growing slowly, but you can see we're going into winter now, so our birth rate is dropping down a bit. Now, there is a way that you can boost birth rate by you doing medical research. That comes under this area here. There's a tech down here. It says increase birth rate. Now, this is what's called a repeatable tech, in the sense that by doing this doesn't mean you increase the birth rate permanently. What you get is a boost of your birth rate for about 6 months, but of course you need a medical university to actually do that. So our population is working quite well. We've got 5% unemployment. We've got 91 people here, which means that we probably could do with another bus actually. Let me just see. What's our workforce here? We could probably do with a little bit more of a workforce. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop in another bus, because obviously we want to get as many workers out here as possible so that we can make money. What buses we got? A Sked 760, whatever it is. So just buy another bus and put it on the route. Just buy you. Eventually you will get to a point where you may need to review a bus link line or something like that, so that you can get better quality buses, but at the moment we're not that far ahead, so we'll just add you to the mix. We'll get more workers out here, because this is another thing that you will need to do when you get to a certain, like this point, is you need to push more and more workers out into this industry. And this is another reason why you don't want to expand out too fast, too quickly into new industries. When you've got a core profit making industry like this, you do need to get your workers into here, so that you can make more money. Right, I'm going to do now is just speed the game up a little bit. What I'm going to do now is just give you a quick overview of the farm. What am I thinking? Oh yeah, what I want to do first is just show you here. When you're in the harvest cycle, what you want to do is go over fields, especially fields that have been harvested. And this is looking good, because what we got here is you can see we got a symbol here that says 0.1 tons of crops. That means there's a tiny little bit of crops left in here. Now, one potential danger sign is that if you've got a field saying being harvested like this, and you can see it in here, it's got 64 tons of crops in here, because the trucks aren't keeping up with the harvester. Now that's a potential risk now, in the sense that if those crops aren't collected by the end of the month, they will be lost. But worst of all is if you've got a field that's been harvested and that's still got crops sat in it. Now the other thing I want to show you is here you can see the tractors are now already out spreading the not liquid fertilizer, because you can see that if you look at the economy, because we've got auto purchase, we're not actually importing liquid fertilizer. What we are actually doing at the moment is spreading this fertilizer. You can see it's actually run out now. So you probably find our truck. So are we actually importing liquid fertilizer? Yeah, we're importing fertilizer, but we're not keeping up with it. So what these tractors are actually doing is spreading the ordinary fertilizer on it. And if I show you here, what you will see is that they're already starting to improve the fertilizer in these fields, because as these fields get harvested, you will see that the fertility drops right down again now to 40%, 50%. It's actually lower now than when we actually first placed the fields at 70%. So getting your fertilizer out here and building up, you can see these have already been done. They're 150%. But if you don't have that supply of ordinary fertilizer now, you won't build up the fertility to a high enough level to get a benefit in the next year. But of course, there's also a fringe benefit in the sense that the fertility in the fields will recover naturally, but I think they will only recover naturally to 100% or less. In fact, I've never seen one recover naturally to 100%, even in my testing. So you can see here that if you watch these long enough, you will see that as the crops are being harvested, the fertility is dropping, but these have got nutrient levels in. What you'll probably find is that, yeah, these have got nutrient levels in as well. But this time of year, it's the fertilizer that's actually being spread across the fields here. So what I'm going to do now is kind of talk to anybody who's a new player that's been following this series trying to learn the game. One thing that will happen when you're playing your first game, you will get to a point, we all make mistakes, but as a new player, you may have made a few bad decisions. I know I did it. I mean, some of my first games were absolutely atrocious, and I had complete population collapses and something like that. And there's something that you may experience as a new player, because things can get out of control very quickly, especially when the winter comes around. But you will get to a point where you're either got an economy that's not working and it's getting frustrating. There will be a point when you're playing your first game or your second game where you may think, well, I would like to look at some of the other options in the game, but I don't. But that's a long way down the line. That's why I would say now, if you've got to a point in your first or second game and you're feeling comfortable with the mechanics you're playing with, what I would suggest now is you would do the Soviet Revolution campaign, because you've now built up an understanding of the basics. And what you will get from doing the Soviet campaign is the campaign will take you through shipping, aircraft, industries, some of the more advanced mechanics related to your economy. And more importantly, one of my favorite ones, which actually taught me a few things, was the final section on nuclear energy, because nuclear is normally a very late game technology you use, and it's incredibly powerful, but it's very easy to get wrong. And there's a section in there which is very interesting, which relates to exporting electricity. Give you a tip. That is that the maximum you can export to any one point is 18 megawatts. Now, nuclear power plants produce, I don't know if I can show you in here. Nuclear power plants produce phenomenal amounts of power. You can see there it produces 9,360 megawatts. So if you're going to be exporting power, which is what the objective is in the Soviet Revolution, what you've got to literally do is you're going to need to research this power cable, get 18 megawatts, and run dedicated lines from the power station to the export point. No deviations. Don't put it through any of these junctions. Just connect the power station up to the export point. It's not something I would normally do in a normal game. So that's something that you definitely do need to consider to be able to fulfill that objective. Now what I'm going to do is turn around here, because we're now on the 18th of November, and we are playing on fast. And I just want to kind of look at the fields, because when we hit a cutoff point, something quite dramatic could happen. If you're a new player learning, that you will get to a point where you think, yes, I've got a handle on all these mechanics. I want to take it to the next level. That's when you would think about a restart. And what I want to do is kind of talk a little bit about a progression path for if you feel that you want to go to another level. Right, snow's just coming. Apologies, I'm trying to do two things at once at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip to that, because I know we're in white now, but you see this field here has got 15 tons, 17 tons. What have we got up here? Yeah, I think we got things overall under control. So what I want to do is just talk about the progression path, and probably the best way to explain it is by using the game settings here. What I would suggest for a second playthrough, if you're confident with this one, would be to switch on water management and crime and justice. These are progressions. In fact, if you're really comfortable with an existing game like you've got now, and you've got a population less than, say, 5,000, you could switch on crime and justice inside of an existing game, because it's relatively straightforward. And in fact, what I might do is actually do that just to demonstrate it in a future video, because crime and justice is something that you can switch on because it scales with population. And when you've got a small town, crime and justice isn't really having an effect on your overall population. Water is relatively straightforward mechanics. And then once you've got a handle on the water, which shouldn't take long, I mean, again, I'm just kind of stretching the point, and maybe if some of you feel a bit ambitious, while you've got one town, you haven't got that much in the way of industry, although we do have the fabric factory that will require water. And if you've got a great big pile of money, what you can do, we're getting close to the end of the cycle, I'm facing the wrong, what you can do is actually re-engineer the water back into your existing economy. But if you've got more than one town and you've got multiple industries that rely on water, it may not be such a good idea. So we're now on the 29th of November, and you can see that if you keep an eye on this tractor, in fact, we've kind of cleared all the fields. Actually, this might be the better option if we come up this end, because this is where the activity is. So we've actually done quite well, actually. I was expecting to lose. We're going to lose one field up here. So this is a good example. This field is a complete loss. It's probably got a combine coming out here. Yeah, there's a combine coming here. This guy is probably trying to get to this field, but he's not going to make it. And this is something that you definitely want to do when you finish your first harvest. So we've managed to finish this field. This guy's finished. So we've got here, yeah, you can see he's just coming here. We're on the 1st of December. He's going to get into, there we are. So it's the 2nd of December. Fields that still had crops in and things to go turn black. Successfully harvested fields stay white. So effectively what we did here is we lost the entire output from this field. So what that means is that for the level of harvesters and tractors we got at the moment, we've got one field too many. What we have got here is the trucks that we're loading have still got the crops there. And what you will see now is that this field has got crops in. This one, luckily, we had a covered hole in picking up, so we didn't lose anything there. So we've lost 1.5, the output of an entire field here, which would have been 300 tons. We've lost this field here. Oh no, we might just be able to steal it. Oh wow, yeah. Because what happens is that any crops left in the fields will slowly rot away, like this one. This one was rotted away. And we actually did quite well, actually. That was a very, very big surprise. And just to give you a review of where we are, we've got 758 tons of crops in this grain storage there. So what I'm going to do is, we're not going to get any more crops in here. It's all delivered now. So I'm just going to flip this guy and say, go and empty it out completely. And if we go back to our main storage, we've got 5,000 tons of crops in here. Now, I'll be completely upfront. I'll be very surprised if this will last us right through to July next year, because bearing in mind that we are making both clothes, food and alcohol, and we are exporting all three of them. Now, you could stretch it to July if you turn around and said we're not going to export it, or you limited the industry. But at the moment, we want to make money, and we do have a very powerful option to do here. This is another interesting effect. If you've got crops on, you can actually see the crops inside of the trains. So what we're going to do is empty out that there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is return back to the learning progression path. Apologies for that digression, but I really did wanted to show you guys what happens to the harvest. So the learning progression, assuming that you've just got to a point with your first series, you're happy with it, you decided to do the Soviet Revolution, and as I was mentioning here, the next series I would recommend doing crime and justice and water management, because it's a step up, but it's not a massive step up. Now comes the next bit, which is quite fun. I would suggest, depending on the level of your confidence, I would say that, well, in fact, I would go as far, if you're feeling very confident, maybe the next cycle of a new game, that you actually do crime, water, and maintenance. The thing about the maintenance mechanic is that, like crime and justice, it doesn't hit straight away. It's roughly about 5 years gameplay before maintenance starts to become an issue. But it is something that can go out of control very, very quickly. So maybe if you want to take a little bit of a flutter with maintenance when you do your second playthrough, give it a go, because one thing you can do if things start to go pear-shaped is you can just switch it off. And this is something you do need to remember when you start to push the boundaries. And this is something you do need to remember when you want to start pushing forward. If you set up a game and things aren't working too well, you can always come in here and switch them off. Now, that just leaves waste management. Now, actual mechanics of maintenance is relatively straightforward on the surface. That is that every industry, residents, everything produce different types of waste. There's lots of types of waste. What you've got to do is collect it. So the first challenge is the logistics of collecting the waste, and that really starts to grow as your economy expands. But then comes the big challenge, is what you're going to do with it, because initially you start dumping it in the customs shed because you can sell it. But remember that certain types of waste is you've got to pay for them to take it away. You're not going to make money from it. And the real challenge is in the waste disposal and management, and along with the associated logistics of getting the right waste to the right location to support what you're trying to do. And this is particularly challenging when you get into recycling, which you will do, because recycling is one way of avoiding the costs of trying to dump it. And one of the key ways of getting rid of things is by incineration. It's not shown us here. We won't highlight the buildings because we don't have the deck. Actually, I'm just going to pause the game, and because I do really want to emphasize this. So what I'm going to do is do this. It's very risky, but we're okay. Right, I'm going to keep the game on pause simply because this is very risky. So we've now actually switched on waste management. And just to give you a run through on this, what you've got here is these garbage collection stands. These are unlocked from the beginning. You see a lot of this is locked behind research. Gravel's always been available. You get a waste treatment plant, which is for dealing with hazardous waste, because you get certain types of waste in the game, which is what's called mixed waste and hazardous waste. But the mixed waste is then subdivided into a whole list of other wastes, which can then be processed. So you get plastic waste, steel waste, aluminium waste, and then more importantly, these buildings here, if I come into here, you can actually do, once you've done the right research, you can do separation. Now, in the context of the farming, is that certain buildings, not every building produces the same type of waste. Residential areas also produce a certain amount of biological waste. And then that biological waste can then be sent to the fertilizer plant, which is in here. So you've got a composting plant, they call it. So the composting plant, you can see, doesn't require search. It's been disabled in the current game because it's been not available. And you can see here that you can turn 30 tons of biological waste with chemicals into 25 tons of fertilizer. Be aware that when you're collecting it from residential areas and other areas, it's very, very small amounts. So you're not going to get vast amounts from your systems. One tip is that tourist areas produce a lot more biological waste. And this is where the logistics challenge comes in, that you've got to be able to gather all these resources together without getting in too far into this. But the standard way of getting rid of your mixed waste is to burn it, which is good from the beginning. But if you look at this, these produce really massive amounts of pollution. You've got one here, it produces 71 tons of pollution. So you don't want these incineration plants within about 1.5 to 2 kilometers of your residential areas. Otherwise, you're going to get massive pollution problems. And then down here at the end here is the dumps where you dump stuff into. The real challenge of when you've got waste, and this is what makes it the most difficult of all the mechanics to come to terms with, and it's the logistics and what you do with the waste and gathering it up to make it viable to do the recycling that is the real challenge of waste. And the consequences of getting it wrong can be quite dramatic, because if you don't collect the waste in your residential areas, your population will very quickly get sick. If you don't collect the waste in your industries, like say for example here, now we've got the internal garbage stand here. If this garbage stand fills up, what will happen is your industry will stop, and that's one of the reason why I would say that you can do all the other mechanics in the game, but leave waste until you've really got a firm understanding of the game. Ooh. So what I'm going to do now is just flip this back. The other thing is you've also got waste and demolition. This is really for realistic gameplay. What that is, it's an extra little mechanic, which means that any build, if you place a building or road and you then want to remove it, what you've got to do is actually physically demolish the buildings. And of course, what that does is give you waste. Anyway, so we're just going to disable maintenance again. Just flip that very quickly. So hopefully, if you're still trying to learn the game, I haven't put you off, guys. This game is very satisfactory if you're really into being the challenge of dealing with all these mechanics. As I say, so that's the escalation path. The cautious approach is to do water and crime next, and then water, crime, and building maintenance. Building maintenance is relatively easy to do, as it's more a question of planning your towns and protecting your vehicles and buildings. And then of course the big one is waste management. And one thing I will do to just wind up this section is that what I used to do is I used to play a series to a certain point, and then like now, and then I'd say, right, I think I've understood the technology, I'm comfortable. What I would do sometimes is actually say if I made a mistake or I got there, I'd go back to a previous save game and then come forward again just to see if something worked in a different way. During this, if you are learning the game, stick to random maps to begin with. They're far more easy to play, unless of course you see a custom map or in-game map that you feel that you're ready for that challenge. So that's it for this kind of little bit of pep talk about how to learn the game. Hopefully I haven't put you off, and maybe I've actually triggered your interest in maybe starting to push out a little bit further. Now, to wind up the video, what I want to do now is just kind of go through research, because I've now finished the, I think while we were talking, I think I've now finished the option to, not secret police, where is it? I'm sure it's in here somewhere. We've now got access to the radio station. You can see the radio station is massive. Oh god, what on earth is this going on? You get these, it says start of road not connected. I've got absolutely no idea, and he's not telling me where he's going. There's some building that he wants to go and investigate, which he can't get to. It could be this metro system that's confusing him, because I can't think of anything else. The other reason you might get this is, and it's a bit of a bug that's been around for some time, it's to do with buildings which are only connected by footpaths. I've had it with ambulances as well, and the only thing you can really do is just sell them. And this level you get money. If you playing at the higher levels, it will cost you money. And but if you're playing on realistic mode with waste management on, what you need to do is send them to there is a building that is available in waste management which actually scraps vehicles, but that is a whole raft of waste management, not waste management, vehicle maintenance. That's a whole raft of vehicle maintenance that I'm not even going to start talking about in this video. Hopefully this will slowly drop down. And of course what we've also got here is workers being dropped in here to actually build this accommodation, because we do need to build the accommodation up. So I think I've covered everything I want to do in this video, and what I'll say is, if you've got any questions about learning the game and anything specific, feel free to drop it in the comments. But until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.